Hi all, welcome back to another edition of Adobe Illustrator Basics. This is the third video. Here we're going to discuss a few things: shapes, groups, layers, selection, and what you can do with the selection arrow, stroke symbology. We've seen a bit of this. We're going to investigate further how to create a compound path, and how to use the Pathfinder tool. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to open a new file. Again, I'll select centimeters, landscape. Okay, we have our drawing canvas. Now, to start, we're going to investigate some shapes. We know these well at this point. I'll draw a rectangle here. We can draw some polygons, simple ones. I'll add a few fun shapes here. We'll do a star. Heck, we'll do 2 stars. A rounded ellipse. And let's give ourselves a square. Oh, how could I forget circle? Well, let's just get started. So, we're familiar at this point with what we're seeing here. We have a stack of different shapes. They have a specific stacking relationship. You can see here this rounded rectangle is on top of the star. Sometimes we may find that we want these shapes to behave together. So for example, I can select this star, and obviously it moves independently. But one thing I could do is actually select one star, and if I hold the Shift key and select a different object, I then simultaneously have 2 objects selected. I could also click and drag the selection arrow so that it encompasses those 2 shapes. When I let go, those 2 shapes are selected. If I want to group these together so that they are treated as one shape, you can choose Object, Group, or you can just use the shortcut Control-G. We'll treat them so now they're one shape, and anywhere I click on that shape, it will select both of those. Let's see, I'm going to select it. I could right-click. I could undo that by selecting Ungroup, and now they go back to behaving independently. So I'll group these 3 shapes together. There's another option that you can right-click and group, or Control-G. And now, no matter what I do, those 3 are a package deal. If I bring those to the front, arrange, bring to front, the whole package has been brought to front. So groups can be pretty powerful. We'll see that they pop up when we're manipulating shapes a little bit later. So I'm going to select this again and ungroup. And just to make things look a little more interesting, I'm going to add some fill to my shapes. I don't want boring shapes here. So I mentioned before how the selection tool works. I mentioned a little bit, you guys have used it a little bit. So one powerful thing is if you click and drag the mouse drawing that square, you can select everything. Alternatively, you can choose Control-A, and that actually selects all, kind of Control-All. So that should give you a little bit of a better understanding in how to control shapes. One thing to notice, just to point out here, most of my stroke, well, all of my stroke widths are at 1. That's pretty standard. I know we've had fun drawing really fat strokes on shapes, but typically, at least for our uses, we shouldn't be wider than about 3. If we're going to use it for a figure, it can be distracting. The next thing I want to show you is how to add layers. So notice, as I hover the mouse around, all of these shapes have these dark blue or navy blue guides. That lets me know that all of those shapes are on the same layer because they have the same guide color, that dark blue color. I'm going to select Window and bring up my Layers options. This shows me there is just one layer. And now if you look down where my mouse is, I will select Create New Layer, and it will have a new one. And so in our Layers toolbar, notice that I can click this box and turn on a lock symbol, and there's also an eyeball symbol. This toggles the visibility. So I could turn the visibility of our layer off and back on. If that layer is locked, it's inaccessible. I can't select anything in that layer. That's particularly useful if you have a background image. No matter what you do, you can't affect the base layer if it's locked. So now we're on layer 2. I'm going to draw a few more shapes. We'll get a bunch of those circles in there that I was missing from before. They're all different colors. Again, I'll make them a little more interesting. We'll get some different colored circles here. So these circles that I've just drawn, if you remember, they're all contained in this next layer. So if I were to select everything, it would only select my next layer, which is actually outlined in red instead of blue. So now I know that those are on my red layer. You can see again here, this is the visual key to help you remember what layer you're dealing with. I could lock that layer and unlock this other one and go back and modify the lower layer and so forth. I could change the visibility. And so now you have an idea of how layers work and how to lock layers. I'm actually going to, let's get rid of our lowest layer, the first one we had done. So to do that, I could select it here in the Layers menu and actually drag it into the trash. So that deletes that entire layer. And now we're just dealing with the circles that we have drawn before. So the next thing I want to show you how to do is a little bit complicated. So this is something that can be very useful in the geosciences. I'm going to draw a big rectangle here to show you what I'm doing. Now, here we've got some familiar items. So we've got a fill and a stroke. But if we want this stroke to have lots of different symbols over its run, over its length, we have to get a little bit more complicated. So to do that, I'm actually going to add, well, I'm not going to do it. We'll go ahead and select this. We'll press Control-C to copy and Control-V to have a rectangle that's identical. So if we want to really play with the symbology, what I'm going to do is select this lowest rectangle and turn the stroke off. So that rectangle has no stroke. We can see when I unselect them, one has an outline and one does not. And this other one, it has an outline, but it has a fill. So I'm going to turn the fill off for that particular rectangle. So now we have just a stroke as one shape selected here, and just a fill as this other shape. If I drag, let's see, if I drag just my path, just my stroke, Adobe Illustrator will help us in lining those up perfectly. And so here you can see I've I've kind of snapped to my previous rectangle. So now it looks just like it had before, but now I can treat the stroke independent of the rectangle. So I could bring out the scissors tool like we had done before, and I could chop this thing up. Let's give a few chops here. Okay, so now I could actually select different portions. I'll bring up my stroke options, and I could have some portion of that box be a dashed line, where the other portion is a solid line. And I could have some portions be a heavier weight than other portions. I could do all kinds of different symbologies. I'm getting crazy, I could add an arrowhead on some. I can do all kinds of different things. But in the context of what we would use this for to create a geologic map, being able to break a solid line around a polygon and have it partially represented as a dashed line is really powerful. So we're going to bring that to the front. Control Z, I'm going to go a few steps backwards here. Control Z is undo. Let's see. A couple more things that I want to show you how to do. I'm going to get rid of that for now and go back to our circles that we have. Oh, we have all of this outline left. So just focusing on our circles, there's a few really powerful tools that I will show you within the toolbar here. I'm going to close my stroke, I'm going to close my layers out, and I'm going to open the window that's called Pathfinder. Pathfinder is just so great. You'll love this. So we have all of these different shapes here. The first thing I want to show you how to do is create a compound shape. So that will take what we have, and actually just to get some more, I'm going to Control P and Control V. I'm going to get us a few more circles to use here. So with Pathfinder, there are quite a few different options. The first one I'm going to show you is how to create a compound path. So I'm going to select multiple shapes. You can see shown here all of the shapes that I have selected. I'll add this guy to our selection. And this module here, you can see under Shape Modes, Unite, this will create one shape out of all of these different individual shapes that we had drawn, just like so. And now it's all one shape. It actually kind of looks like a cloud. This can be really powerful when combined with the next step that we'll look at. For now, I'm going to delete, delete. Draw a few examples. I'll draw a rectangle here. We'll get a star going on. And a circle, and heck, that's good for now. So let me give each of these a different stroke just to make them easier to see, or a different fill, excuse me. So what I want to do at this point is actually show you how to use a great tool. I can select both the star and the square here, and this is the divide function. So if I select divide, and it will divide all of the polygons that were overlapping that were selected. Notice that now my rectangle has part of the star in it. So when you do that function, it automatically groups all of the symbols. I can right-click and ungroup, and now I can break my star apart into these different pieces. So that's a really useful tool. I could combine these two shapes. Let's see, I'll divide. And maybe when I ungroup, I want this one to go back to being part of the circle. I could actually select that end of the circle and unite. And now you see how to do it. So follow the assignment, turn it in PDF form, you'll see it posted. All right, Thanks. Bye.